The problem with the Jodi Huisentruit case isn't a lack of suspects, it's a labyrinth of possibilities with minimal evidence. Like peeling an onion layer by layer, in this story I will try to examine how a young woman vanished in minutes, creating a mystery that has confounded investigators for nearly 3 decades. The solution might lie in concentric circles of suspicion, starting with her immediate surroundings and working outward. Was it someone in her apartment that morning, explaining the raised toilet seat? Was it the friend who claimed to be the last to see her alive? Or was it a predator who simply saw an opportunity in the darkness? By examining each layer carefully, together we might understand why this case remains unsolved and possibly spot what investigators may have missed all along. Stay with me as I provide new and recent updates on Jodi's story later in this video. Join me for another odd, strange, and mysterious story here at Odd Mystery Stories. Imagine standing in an empty parking lot before dawn. Now imagine that in a matter of mere seconds, a life could be snatched away, leaving nothing but scattered belongings as the only witnesses. This is exactly what happened at the Key Apartments in Mason City, Iowa on that fateful June morning. When producer Amy Coons called Jodi Huisentruit at 4 a.m. on June 27, 1995, she expected a typical conversation with her anchor, who had simply overslept. The brief exchange seemed normal enough. Jodi answered, sounding groggy but alert, and promised to hurry to the studio. But that promise would never be kept. As minutes ticked by, Amy's annoyance transformed into concern. The 5 a.m. call went unanswered. By 6 a.m., with still no sign of Jodi and the morning broadcast looming, Amy made the decision to anchor the show herself, something Jodi would never willingly allow if she could help it. The empty chair beside the news desk became a silent, haunting symbol of Jodi's absence. When the broadcast finally wrapped at 7 a.m., concern had evolved into genuine alarm. This wasn't like Jodi, a dedicated professional who took her morning anchor position very seriously. Something was wrong. Coworkers immediately contacted police, initiating what would become one of Iowa's most enduring mysteries. Officers arriving at the Key Apartments encountered a scene that instantly confirmed their worst fears. Jodi's red Mazda Miata sat parked just 12 feet from her apartment door, close enough that she should have made it safely in seconds. Instead, they found a display of violence frozen in time. The parking lot told a chilling story through its silent evidence. A car key bent in an unnatural angle near the driver's side door. Red high heels that would never again carry their owner to work. A hairdryer and earrings scattered across the asphalt, not casually dropped, but violently torn from their owner. Each object a tragic reminder of an interrupted routine. The drag marks etched into the pavement near Jodi's car revealed the physical struggle. The evidence painted a vivid picture. A young woman approached from behind, likely as she was inserting her key into the lock. A sudden attack, a desperate struggle, and then nothing. These details revealed something deeply troubling: the timing. Precisely when Jodi would be leaving for work, suggested intimate knowledge of her schedule. The location, the brief, vulnerable moment between her apartment door and car, indicated someone who had studied her movements. The execution, quick and efficient in the dim pre-dawn light, pointed to careful planning. Forensic technicians documented every detail, a palm print on the car door that would frustrate investigators for years, a strand of hair collected but never matched to any suspect. The physical evidence, while substantial, would ultimately prove maddening in its inability to point definitively to a single culprit. The timeline placed the abduction at around 4:30 a.m., just after Jodi had spoken with Amy. With most residents still asleep, the perpetrator found the perfect window of opportunity. The street lamps provided only limited visibility, creating shadows perfect for concealment. What makes this case particularly haunting is how perfectly executed it was. The abductor knew exactly when Jodi would emerge from her apartment. They knew the layout of the parking lot and the position of her car. They struck when she would be most distracted, keys in hand, focused on the day ahead rather than the potential dangers lurking nearby. The forensic evidence all pointed to one uncomfortable conclusion. Whoever took Jodi that morning knew her. Perhaps not intimately, but well enough to predict her movements with alarming accuracy. Well enough to know exactly when she would be most vulnerable. Well enough to disappear with her completely, leaving behind only the scattered remnants of a life interrupted. The contrast was striking. Outside, the parking lot revealed a tale of violent confrontation, but stepping through the door of apartment number 4 felt like entering another world. While the outside scene screamed chaos, Jodi's apartment whispered normalcy, almost too normal. Like a stage set waiting for its actor to return, everything remained in perfect order. No forced entry, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle. It was as if whoever took Jodi had never set foot inside. But investigators sensed something wasn't quite right. Several details quickly formed a disturbing pattern. The raised toilet seat in Jodi's bathroom, really unusual for a woman living alone, 2 empty wine glasses on the kitchen counter, and several beer cans in the sink. Together, these items revealed a social evening that none of Jodi's friends or coworkers had mentioned. These discoveries dramatically shifted the investigation's direction. Someone had been with Jodi the evening before, someone comfortable enough to use her bathroom and share drinks. The critical questions emerged. Who was this person? And why hadn't they come forward? And most importantly, could they have returned the following morning? Searching for answers, investigators examined Jodi's journal, hoping her private thoughts might illuminate her final days. Her entries were surprisingly sparse, showing no signs of fear or distress. However, one concerning note stood out. Jodi had written about wanting to change her phone number because of, quote, nasty and naughty calls. This harassment could potentially be connected to what happened to her on that fateful morning. Phone records provided a crucial timeline anchor. At 8:24 p.m. on her last evening, Jodi called her friend Kelly, sounding cheerful and discussing weekend plans without any indication of worry. This call confirmed Jodi was in her apartment at a specific time, creating a critical reference point for the investigation. If someone was with her that night, they either arrived after 8:24 or were present during the call but not mentioned, noted one investigator. The contrast between that final cheerful conversation and what awaited her hours later was particularly haunting. A young woman planning a future while completely unaware of her fate. The apartment itself remained frozen in time, capturing the moment when Jodi last closed the door behind her. Personal items sat exactly where she had left them, with only her purse and briefcase missing, items she would naturally take to work. Valuables remained untouched, eliminating robbery as a motive. Everything suggested a woman who fully expected to return home after her morning broadcast. When pieced together, these clues suggested 2 possibilities. Either Jodi had an invited guest who later became her abductor, or she had 2 separate visitors, one welcome and one with sinister intent. The wine glasses and raised toilet seat became central pieces of this puzzle. If the evening visitor was innocent, why didn't they come forward after Jodi's disappearance made headlines? Why has their identity remained hidden for nearly 3 decades? Perhaps most unsettling is the stark contrast between the apartment's interior and the violent scene outside. Inside showed signs of normal socialization and comfort. The parking lot told a completely different story, one of surprise, struggle, and force. This juxtaposition suggests Jodi may have trusted someone the night before, never suspecting this person, or someone else entirely, would return with harmful intentions. Someone inserted themselves into Jodi's disappearance investigation with unusual eagerness. While investigators searched for clues in her apartment, John Vansice was already telling police he'd been the last person to see her alive. This 49-year-old man had formed what many considered an oddly intense relationship with a woman 22 years his junior, and his account of their final evening together would raise as many questions as it answered. The timeline of Jodi's last known evening creates a troubling framework. She spent most of that evening at the Mason City Country Club playing golf with friends, reportedly leaving around 8 p.m. Phone records show she made a call from her apartment at 8:24 p.m., giving her just 24 minutes between these two confirmed locations. With this narrow window, Vansice claimed something remarkable happened. According to his account, Jodi visited his home that evening specifically to watch a video of a birthday party he had thrown for her. He maintained they spent time together viewing this footage before she departed for her apartment. Geography makes this story highly improbable. In Mason City, driving from the country club to Vansice's house would take approximately 12 minutes, and then another 8 to 10 minutes from his residence to Jodi's apartment. This leaves virtually no time for her to have watched any video, much less spent time at his home, the first major red flag in his account. Vansice first met Jodi when he lived in her apartment complex. After moving to a different part of Mason City, he maintained a connection that friends described as unusually intense. He frequently attended her social gatherings and inserted himself in her social circle despite their significant age difference. His behavior after her disappearance raised additional concerns. He quickly arrived at her apartment complex once the news broke, speaking readily to media outlets and positioning himself as someone especially close to Jodi. Perhaps most telling was his boat named Jodi, a gesture that symbolized a possessive attachment that contradicted the fatherly relationship he claimed. Friends painted a more complex picture. While Vansice consistently described their bond in paternal terms, several of Jodi's acquaintances suggested his interest appeared more romantic or possessive. One friend observes Vansice wanted to be around her all the time and seemed unusually invested in her social activities. Another noted that his attention often made Jodi visibly uncomfortable, though she remained polite given his connection to her social circle. For the morning of June 27th, Vansice provided a specific alibi. He claimed he was on his regular morning walk with LaDonna Woodford, who called him at around 6 a.m. Woodford confirmed this account, placing him elsewhere during the estimated time of Jodi's abduction. Police interviewed Vansice extensively, and he voluntarily submitted to polygraph testing. Law enforcement has never publicly disclosed the results. Despite his apparent cooperation, suspicion continued to follow him through the decades. In 2017, more than 20 years after Jodi vanished, investigators executed search warrants for GPS data related to his vehicles both in Arizona and Iowa. That same year, he was subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury in connection with the case. These developments suggested authorities still considered him a person of interest despite the passage of time. Vansice had relocated to Arizona years earlier, seemingly to escape the cloud of suspicion that had followed him since 1995. Through all these years, he has maintained his innocence. Yet, he remains inextricably linked to the case as the self-proclaimed last person to see Jodi alive, a claim that had kept him at the center of both the official investigation and public speculation for nearly 3 decades. Stay tuned to this video for recent updates to this story. What if the most crucial witnesses to Jodi's abduction didn't even realize what they were hearing? The residents of key apartments were about to become unwitting participants in a mystery that would haunt them for decades. While investigators scrutinized John Vansice's statements, vital evidence was literally evaporating into the morning air just feet from where Jodi lived. In the haunting stillness of the 4:30 a.m., sounds carried easily through the complex, sounds that would later take on devastating significance. The Key Apartments complex created an eerie backdrop with its modest layout and dimly lit parking areas. Street lights cast long shadows across the pavement where Jodi would soon walk. The 12-foot journey from her apartment to her car, a distance most residents traversed mindlessly, became a site of a life-changing struggle. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how close neighbors were to the abduction. Multiple residents reported hearing a woman's scream pierce the pre-dawn quiet, yet not a single person called the police. The human mind often rationalizes disturbing sounds, especially when half asleep. Many told investigators they dismissed the disturbance as rowdy campers or simply rolled over, their brains refusing to process that someone might be in genuine danger mere feet from their beds. One neighbor's testimony stands out with chilling precision. Living up the street, he noticed something in the parking lot at around 4:30 a.m., a light-colored van, its parking lights glowing like predatory eyes in the darkness, headlights deliberately switched off. This ghostly vehicle, materializing precisely when Jodi vanished, would become one of investigation's most tantalizing leads. The van wasn't the only warning sign. Another resident named Joan had heard something disturbing the night before, a man pounding on Jodi's door shouting, "Jodi, open the door, I know you're in there." Yet, Joan mentioned this to authorities only months later during a journalist's interview. This crucial information, a confrontation hours before Jodi disappeared, remained unknown during the critical early days of the case. These witness accounts eventually helped police construct a timeline and identify vehicles of interest, but the delay proved costly. When investigators finally learned about the phantom van and the shouting incident, the trail had grown cold. The complex lacked security cameras that might have captured the vehicle. License plates couldn't be recalled. The man at Jodi's door remained unidentified. The physical evidence told part of the story, drag marks on the pavement suggesting Jodi was forcibly taken while unlocking her car. But human witnesses could have filled crucial gaps. This is the tragedy within the tragedy. People heard and saw things that might have solved this case, but the significance escaped them until too late. Police faced an uphill battle gathering information. Some neighbors came forward days or weeks after the incident, their memories already fading. Others questioned whether what they had heard was relevant at all. By the time investigators assembled these scattered puzzle pieces, the suspect, and Jodi, were long gone. Why didn't these crucial accounts immediately crack the case? The witnesses couldn't connect their observations to a crime until learning about Jodi's disappearance. The white van was seen only by one person, with no license plate recorded. The screams lasted only moments, not long enough for sleepy residents to fully process what they were hearing, let alone call police. This pattern of missed opportunities created a perfect environment for an abductor to strike and vanish. The 12 feet between Jodi's door and her car, a distance that could have taken seconds to cross, became the most dangerous path in Mason City that morning. In that brief space, with neighbors unwittingly listening to the sounds of a struggle, Jodi Huisentruit disappeared from the world. While neighbors slept through the sounds of Jodi's abduction, she herself had been wide awake to the danger for months. Imagine knowing someone is watching you, following you in a black truck, calling your home with disturbing messages, yet being unable to put a face to the threat that's circling ever closer. 8 months before her disappearance, in October 1994, Jodi took the extraordinary step of filing a police report about a vehicle stalking her. During a routine jog, she noticed a small, newer model black truck following her movements. The driver's intense staring made her uncomfortable enough to report the incident to authorities. Something about this encounter triggered Jodi's instincts that something wasn't right. Police took her statement seriously, offering advice about personal safety, but ultimately their investigation reached a dead end. They couldn't identify either the vehicle or its driver. The incident might have seemed minor at the time, another unpleasant experience for a woman in the public eye. Yet, in retrospect, it takes on a more sinister quality, like the first drop of poison in what would become a toxic brew of fear and danger. Jodi's response was telling. After the black truck incident, she enrolled in self-defense classes, a clear sign she wasn't dismissing the encounter as coincidence. She was arming herself, sensing the threat remained present. Jodi completed those classes in just 3 months before she vanished. And during that training, she confided in her instructor about feeling watched and followed. The stalking signs formed a clear progression as the months passed. First, the following vehicle, then the growing sensation of being watched, and finally, in those last days, disturbing phone calls. Friends reported that Jodi described these calls as, quote, nasty and naughty. The calls bothered her enough that she planned to change her phone number the very day she disappeared. The timing casts a shadow over everything. Was her decision to cut this line of communication the trigger that pushed her stalker to act? Her vulnerability was heightened by her public profile. As a local news anchor, her schedule created a predictable pattern, arriving before dawn for morning broadcasts. Her information was easily accessible with both phone number and address listed in the public directory. Anyone developing an unhealthy interest in the woman on their television could effortlessly discover where she lived. Despite these warning signs, Jodi's reaction revealed a complex psychology. Friends noted she seemed more annoyed than frightened by the calls. This response is common in stalking cases. Victims often minimize threats because confronting the full danger feels too overwhelming. They convince themselves it's merely a nuisance rather than a genuine threat. Was Jodi caught in this psychological trap, failing to recognize the danger until it was too late? What's particularly haunting is how these incidents were only investigated after she disappeared. Police reconstructed these warning signs from interviews with friends and family, piecing together a pattern that might have been obvious if all information had been connected earlier. Each incident alone might not raise serious alarms. Together, they reveal someone circling ever closer to Jodi, like a predator tightening its orbit around its prey. The question that lingers is whether these warning signs could have led to protection. If the dots had been connected sooner, the stalking truck, the sensation of being watched, the disturbing calls, could her disappearance have been prevented? These weren't just random hostility, but signals of danger that became tragically clear only after she vanished. The 12 feet between Jodi's apartment door and her car provided the perfect opportunity for that final, terrible escalation, the moment when warning signs transformed into a nightmare reality. The warning signs in Jodi's life painted a troubling picture, but two men with violent histories would eventually force investigators to widen their search beyond her immediate circle. When someone like Jodi vanishes, you'd expect investigators to look at those closest to her first. But what if the most dangerous threat was hiding just beyond plain sight? In 1997, 2 years after Jodi's disappearance, a serial rapist named Tony Jackson arrived on the investigators' radar. Jackson's case was deeply disturbing because of his proximity. At the time Jodi vanished, he was living just 2 blocks from KIMT studios where she worked each morning. By 1997, Jackson had been convicted of raping 4 women in Minnesota, carrying out brutal assaults with a gun or knife. His attacks followed a concerning pattern. He targeted strangers, breaking into their homes and attacking with extreme violence. What truly captured investigators' attention was a chilling claim from a fellow inmate after Jackson's conviction. According to this informant, Jackson had written rap lyrics referencing killing a female news anchor and mentioned burying a body, quote, near a silo in Tiffin, Iowa. For investigators who had spent 2 years following every possible lead in this case, this demanded immediate attention. The lyrics specifically mentioned an anchor that, quote, was a stabbin'. Jackson's history of attacking unknown women, combined with his geographic proximity to Jodi's workplace, made him an immediate person of interest. Former police chief David King later told reporters, quote, "Yeah, I don't think the 2 and 2 add up to 4 in this case. Despite the troubling coincidences, investigators eventually ruled Jackson out. When confronted, Jackson himself denied involvement. He said, "I don't even know who the hell Jodi Huisentruit was and when I was in Mason City." Investigators ultimately determined there wasn't sufficient evidence connecting him to Jodi. No forensic evidence tied him to the scene, and they couldn't establish any relationship that would have put Jodi in his path. While Jackson represented one outer ring in the circles of suspicion, Thomas Corscadden emerged as another disturbing figure in the investigation. A convicted sex offender living about an hour from Mason City. Corscadden drove a white van similar to the one witnesses reported seeing at the Key Apartments parking lot on the morning Jodi disappeared. Corscadden appeared on the investigators' radar during an unrelated interrogation. When Jodi's case was mentioned, he smiled strangely and said 3 words that sent chills into the room. He said, quote, "Jodi is dead." This certainty from a convicted sex offender about a missing woman immediately raised alarms. Authorities examined Corscadden's movements and that white van similar to the one spotted near Jodi's apartment. Yet, again, they faced the same fundamental challenge. They couldn't find concrete evidence directly linking him to Jodi or the abduction scene. This pattern repeats throughout this case. Potential suspects emerge, with troubling coincidences connecting them to the area or the timeline. But without physical evidence, these leads eventually go cold. The presence of these violent predators within geographic proximity to Jodi raises uncomfortable questions. While police searched for someone stalking Jodi specifically, multiple convicted violent offenders lived within a small radius of her daily routine. The most frustrating aspect of these connections is timing. Jackson wasn't identified as a possible suspect until 2 years after Jodi disappeared. By then, critical evidence that might have connected or cleared him had vanished. Similarly, with Corscadden, the investigation came when memories had faded and evidence had been compromised by that time. In both cases, circumstantial connections without forensic evidence proved insufficient. Living near a crime scene isn't a crime itself. Driving a similar vehicle to the one spotted nearby doesn't constitute proof, and making disturbing comments while suspicious doesn't meet the threshold for an arrest. Nearly 3 decades later, Jodi Huisentruit's case remains an open wound. In 2023, investigators followed yet another lead in Winsted, Minnesota, but like so many searches before, it yielded no answers. Jodi's sister, Joanne Nath, refuses to let her sister become just another cold case. When local interest wanes, she appears on national programs, clutching Jodi's photograph, her voice breaking but her resolve unwavering. Nearly 3 decades after the mysterious disappearance of a television news anchor, Jodi Huisentruit, the case has seen renewed attention due to recent legal proceedings and emerging theories. In March of 2025, private investigator Steve Ridge petitioned the courts to unseal a 2017 search warrant related to the case. The warrant pertained to the GPS data from 2 vehicles owned by John Vansice, a person of interest who was reportedly among the last to see Jodi alive. Vansice passed away in December of 2024, prompting discussions about the relevance of keeping such documents sealed. Ridge argued that unsealing these documents could provide closure to Vansice's family and potentially shed light on the investigation. However, County Attorney Carlisle Dalen opposed the motion, stating that releasing the affidavit could compromise ongoing investigative efforts. In late March, Judge James Drew ruled that while the search warrant and its related documents could be unsealed, the affidavit supporting the warrant would remain sealed to protect the sensitive information known only to law enforcement and the perpetrator. Adding complexity to the case, Ridge suggested that Jodi had begun a relationship with an unnamed individual 10 days before her disappearance. This person, reportedly from out of state, has not been publicly identified, and Ridge has withheld specific details. The nature and significance of this relationship remains subjects of speculation. Furthermore, the broader context of Mason City during the mid-1990s cannot be overlooked. The area was reportedly experiencing significant drug-related activities, leading some to speculate about potential connections between Jodi's disappearance and the criminal underworld. Notably, a known drug dealer in the region was executed during a drug deal gone wrong, shortly after claiming to have information about Jodi's case. While this theory is intriguing, concrete evidence linking these two events remains elusive. As the 30th anniversary of Jodi Huisentruit's disappearance approaches, these developments underscore the enduring complexity of the case. Despite decades of investigation, numerous questions remain unanswered, leaving family, friends, and the community to continue seeking justice and closure. What makes this case so haunting is the abundance of evidence pointing in too many directions. The truth seems hidden in plain sight, buried in details investigators have examined for years without recognition. Every search, every tearful interview carries the same message. Someone knows something. And after nearly 3 decades, perhaps that silence is finally ready to break. Hey, thank you for joining me in another odd mystery. My name is Vince. If you enjoyed this story, you might also be interested in the mysterious killing of Jill Dando, another TV news personality. You'll find the link to that story in the upper right corner of your screen. Your support keeps these stories alive, giving the affected families the hope they seek. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And for those who'd like to further support the channel, be sure to check out our online store for exclusive merch and more. I appreciate you. Thank you.